Welcome back to another explainer. Right at the very end of 2024, on December 31st to be exact, Mexico published a sweeping constitutional reform. And this wasn't just a minor tweak, it fundamentally restructures how the country investigates crime and manages its national security. So today, we're going to cut through all the dense legal jargon, look directly at the source material, and figure out exactly what changed overnight.
We've got a clear roadmap for this. We're going to hit the context of violence, the specific changes to Article 21, the brand new Executive Secretariat, the incredibly fast approval process, and finally, the legal impact and future challenges. Let's dive in.
Starting right off with Section 1, the context of violence.
To really understand the why behind this massive reform, you have to look at the reality on the ground. The text of the initiative explicitly states that the current violence makes a coherent and coordinated response absolutely necessary across all three levels of government. Basically, having divided, siloed efforts scattered across federal, state, and local municipalities, it's simply not working against organized crime. They recognize the need for a totally unified front.
And it's not just about traditional crime anymore either. The Constitution is finally catching up to highly modern threats. The framework has been updated to explicitly target the production and distribution of toxic substances. We're talking about everything from the unregulated production of electronic vapes to the truly unprecedented global epidemic of synthetic drugs like fentanyl.
So, that begs a pretty big question. When faced with an evolving, modern crisis of this scale, how exactly does the foundational document of a country adapt? How do you legally rewire a government to fight back?
Which brings us right to Section 2, the changes to Article 21.
This is the core of the legislative solution, literally rewiring how power is distributed. It basically rests on three fundamental axes. First, shifting who actually gets to investigate crimes. Second, forcing better interinstitutional coordination for the national security strategy. And third, strengthening citizen security actions. If you look at the big picture here, the overarching theme is clearly centralizing leadership directly under the federal executive branch.
Let's zoom in on that first axis for a second. The SSPC, or the Secretariat of Security and Citizen Protection. Previously, investigating crimes was largely the domain of the public ministry and the police. Well, not anymore. The Constitution now legally empowers the SSPC to actively jump into criminal investigations. And crucially, they can now demand information from any state institution to help clarify those crimes. So they're no longer just a preventative body, they are an active investigating force.
This overhaul also signals a massive shift toward applied intelligence. The whole idea is to integrate cutting-edge technology and strategic data analysis into these investigations. By making the SSPC a central hub for all this data, the government aims to anticipate threats, target high-risk areas faster, and really optimize their resources. It's a huge move towards smart, data-driven policing on a national scale.
Let's look at how they manage this in Section 3, the new Executive Secretariat.
With all this new centralized power, you obviously need an administrative engine to make sure everyone is actually playing by the same rules. If you check out the newly added legal text, it explicitly states that federal aid funds given to states and municipalities will now be audited and monitored by this brand new Executive Secretariat. Meaning, if the federal government hands over the funds, they are now legally mandated to track exactly how every single peso gets spent.
Distilling those legal mandates down into functional steps gives us a pretty clear playbook. First, issue national guidelines. Second, standardize or homologate criteria nationwide, so a municipality up in the north operates on the exact same baseline as a state down in the south. And third, aggressively audit those federal security funds. It is all about efficiency, transparency, and total accountability to that central strategy.
Moving to Section 4, the approval process.
Understanding the mechanics of a law is one thing, but looking at how it passed tells us a whole lot about the current political climate. For a constitutional amendment, this speed is absolutely staggering. President Sheinbaum presented the initiative on November 1st. It was approved by the Senate on the 13th, the deputies on the 21st, published on December 31st, and became active law on day 1 of 2025. It clearly reflects the urgent priority the administration placed on this overhaul.
And how did it move so incredibly fast? Because in a rare moment of politicians actually agreeing on something, there was absolutely zero opposition. Over in the Chamber of Deputies, spanning across all the different political parties, 441 voted in favor, 0 against.
Not a single voting member opposed this massive shift in constitutional power.
And the Senate echoed that exact same sentiment. 122 votes in favor, 0 against, 0 abstentions. This level of unanimous, bipartisan consensus really just underscores how universally acknowledged this security crisis is. Regardless of their political stripes, everybody essentially agreed that the system needed a structural overhaul immediately.
Finally, Section 5, the legal impact and challenges.
So we have this fast-tracked, unanimously approved constitutional shift, but what does it actually mean moving forward? Well, it sets up a very tight legal balancing act. On one side, you have the massive intended benefits of centralized coordination, optimizing resources, sharing intelligence, standardizing strategies. But on the other side, you have state autonomy. Lower governments might see their own investigative powers diminished and push back legally against what they might perceive as federal overreach.
The absolute most crucial takeaway from this whole explainer is that constitutional changes are really only step one. Just changing the text of Article 21 doesn't magically stop crime tomorrow, right? The true impact is going to depend entirely on the secondary laws that get drafted to execute it, and, just as importantly, actually allocating the budget to make these systems function without causing a huge jurisdictional turf war.
Which leads us to the ultimate question. As Mexico moves into this brand new era of intelligence-driven security, will the upcoming secondary laws actually achieve that necessary balance between effective central control and local autonomy? It's a high-stakes legal tightrope, and the safety of a nation depends on how they walk it. Thanks so much for joining us to break this down, and we'll see you in the next explainer.